The automatic doors whispered open, releasing a breath of jasmine and sandalwood into the soul afternoon. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across white marble that seemed to glow from within. Everything in this place spoke money, from the hand-stitched leather shoes to the tailored jackets hanging like works of art. When Jackson stepped inside, the entire atmosphere shifted. Staff members straightened their spines. Conversations died mid-sentence. Jackson, Seoul's most notorious underworld figure, had arrived. His charcoal suit fit like it had been painted onto his lean, muscular frame. A platinum Rolex caught the light as he moved, and his face carried the kind of expression that made brave men look away. Those foolish enough to challenge him rarely got a second chance. But violence wasn't why he had come today. He told himself he was here to browse, nothing more. He reached up to straighten his tie, scanning the racks of imported designer, when a voice floated through the space like warm honey. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Zara's atelier." Something in his chest locked up. The boutique owner herself had emerged from a door behind the register. She was stunning. This tall African woman with skin like polished mahogany and thick coils of natural hair that crowned her head like a halo. Her presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. The nameplate pinned to her cream blouse read Zara in elegant script. Her smile was genuine, confident, touched with playful energy. "What brings you in today?" That was when it struck him like lightning. For over a year, Jackson had carried a secret shame. The crash, orchestrated by his enemies, had left him with injuries the surgeons said would last forever. They told him he would never be a complete man again. His body had failed him, leaving him feeling hollow and less than human. Gorgeous Korean actresses had thrown themselves at him, but every encounter ended in humiliation and whispered mockery behind closed doors. But now, standing in this boutique, just hearing Zara's voice, his body woke up. Heat surged through him with a force he hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. His pulse hammered. His manhood stirred, hardened, became undeniable. Terror gripped him. His jaw clenched tight. Cold sweat broke across his temples. He dropped his gaze immediately, unable to meet those kind, curious eyes. His lungs forgot how to work properly. "What's happening to me, sir? Is everything all right?" Zara tilted her head, concern softening her features. Her voice held a firmness that expected truth, the kind of tone that cut through lies. He couldn't form words, couldn't organize his thoughts. His breath hitched like someone had knocked the wind from him without explanation. He spun on his heel and walked straight back toward the entrance. His bodyguards outside looked confused as their boss brushed past them with unusual urgency. The chimes sounded again, and he was gone. Inside, Zara stood blinking in surprise. "Well, that was strange," she murmured to herself. "Did I do something wrong?" Later that evening, Jackson sat in his high-rise apartment, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. A tumbler of scotch shook slightly in his grip. The scene kept replaying behind his eyes. Her smile, her voice, her welcoming energy, and the shocking, glorious truth that followed. For the first time in over a year, his body had responded. He slammed the glass down hard enough to chip the mahogany side table. "This can't be real," he said to the empty room. "I'm losing my mind." But no amount of denial could erase what he felt. 3 days crawled by. He couldn't eat properly. He couldn't concentrate during strategy meetings. His lieutenants noticed the change, but nobody dared question him. Finally, desperate for answers, he called his physician. "You're telling me you had a physical reaction?" The doctor's voice carried heavy skepticism through the phone. Jackson's tone was clipped, defensive. "That's medically impossible. Your diagnostic results are clear. Mr. Min must be psychological, a phantom sensation, nothing tangible." But Jackson knew what his body had told him. The fire had been too real, too powerful to dismiss. He leaned back in his leather office chair, massaging his temples. Maybe he was delusional, but he couldn't shake it. He wanted to see her again. Actually, he needed to. The following week, he found himself back at Zara's atelier. This time he came without his security detail, something unheard of for someone in his position. But caution had taken a back seat to compulsion. The entrance chime rang, and once more her voice reached him. "Back so soon?" Zara's lips curved into an amused smile. She wore a fitted burgundy dress that showed off her curves, and her eyes sparkled with intrigue. "I wouldn't have pegged the great Jackson as someone who enjoys shopping this much." He froze again, his heart slamming against his ribs. The same reaction hit him like a tidal wave. His body responded instantly to the sound of her voice. Heat flooded his face, actually made him blush, and he quickly grabbed the nearest blazer from a display. "I'll purchase this," he mumbled, avoiding her eyes. Her laughter rang out rich and melodic. "Are you certain that one's 3 sizes too small for you? Unless you're buying it as a gift for someone." His ears burned hot. He dropped the blazer on the counter and grabbed another, then another, purchasing them all without checking a single price tag. Zara leaned forward across the counter, resting her chin in her hands. "You know, most customers don't shop like this, and certainly not someone like you. Why is Seoul's most feared man suddenly my most loyal client?" The audacity of her question stole his breath. Nobody spoke to him this way. Nobody. And yet, instead of rage, he felt something different blooming inside him, something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt alive that night, carrying bags filled with clothes he didn't want or need. His men exchanged confused glances, but Jackson ignored them all. His thoughts, his heart, everything was trapped in an endless loop. Her voice, her smile, her boldness. For the first time in years, Jackson, Seoul's savage mafia boss, felt powerless, and strangely, he didn't mind. The next morning, Seoul's streets thrummed with energy. Car horns echoed between skyscrapers, neon signs blinked to life, and crowds rushed toward their daily pursuits. Inside the headquarters of the men's syndicate, however, tension hung thick in the air. Jackson sat at the head of a long conference table, his top men surrounding him. They discussed arms shipments, territorial disputes, and outstanding debts. But Jackson barely registered a word. His mind kept drifting back to the boutique, to Zara's teasing grin and the playful challenge in her gaze. "Boss, should we reroute the delivery to Bisusen?" One lieutenant asked carefully. "Handle it however you see fit," Jackson muttered, waving dismissively. Every man at the table went rigid. The boss never delegated like that. Usually, his word was absolute, sharp, calculated, final. Today, he seemed distracted, soft, and that alone was alarming. By afternoon, he'd made his decision. Without explanation, Jackson dismissed his guards and slid behind the wheel of his black Porsche alone. No convoy, no backup, just him. The streets seemed to part as the mafia boss drove through Seoul. His expression unreadable, but his heart racing wildly when the boutique's glass doors slid open again. The chimes sounded almost like mockery. Zara was there, dressed in a sleek black pants suit that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair styled in elegant twists. She glanced up, spotted him, and grinned. "Well," she said, her voice warm but amused. "Wrap these up." "Of course, boss," she teased, her eyes gleaming as she began folding them. The way she said boss, not in fear, but in playful mockery, made him bite the inside of his cheek to hide the smile, threatening to break through. Meanwhile, across the street, a dark sedan sat waiting. Inside, members of a rival gang observed with growing suspicion. "Why does Jackson keep returning here?" One muttered. "He's always alone. No protection, no entourage. Very strange. Maybe the boss has developed a weakness," another replied. Their eyes narrowed. In the criminal underworld, rumors spread like wildfire, and the idea of the great Jackson showing vulnerability at a public boutique was information rivals could exploit. Back inside, Zara handed him the shopping bags. "There you go, mystery man. Another closet full of clothes you'll probably never wear." To her surprise, Jackson chuckled softly, almost shyly. The sound startled even him. He hadn't laughed like that in years. "You're bold," he said finally, meeting her gaze directly. "And you're strange," she shot back with a grin. "But at least you have excellent taste in boutiques." For a moment, their eyes locked. The air grew thick, charged with something neither could quite name. Jackson's heart pounded, his chest heavy with longing and confusion, but then his phone vibrated. A message from his second-in-command appeared on the screen. "Rival spotted in the area. Stay alert." He clenched his jaw, grabbed the bags, and turned toward the exit. Zara called after him, her voice light but tinged with curiosity. "See you soon, boss. Don't be a stranger." The words hit him like a physical blow. "See you soon." As he stepped into the evening air, Jackson knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't stay away. That night, he stood at his penthouse window once more, watching the city blaze with artificial light. He should have been strategizing, hunting enemies, fortifying his empire. Instead, he thought only of Zara, the way she teased him, the way she showed no fear, the way his body obeyed her voice like some ancient command. And for the first time in years, Jackson, the savage Mafia boss, admitted something to himself. I want her. Not for business, not for ego, but for himself, raw, desperate, and absolutely real. The night sky over Seoul glowed with electric color, but Jackson's penthouse remained shrouded in silence. He sat alone in his private office, the city sprawling before him like a kingdom. He no longer had the energy to rule. Stacks of contracts and intelligence reports lay scattered across the desk, completely ignored. His mind kept circling back to one thing. One woman, Zara. Her laugh, her teasing, the way she looked into his eyes like he wasn't a monster or a legend, but simply a man who could blush, a man who could stumble, and even worse, she was the only one who made him feel truly alive. By morning, he was already behind the wheel of his Porsche, headed back to Zara's Zatelier. He hated how desperate this made him feel, hated the need burning inside his chest, but he couldn't fight it anymore. The boutique's glass doors chimed as he entered. Zara stood behind the counter, scrolling through something on her tablet. Today, she wore a deep emerald jumpsuit that highlighted her curves like it had been custom-made. She glanced up, her lips already forming a knowing smirk. "Well, look who's back," she said smoothly. The man with more clothes than a fashion magazine. Jackson froze as always. The moment she spoke, his body betrayed him instantly. Heat surged through him, his pulse quickening dangerously. He gripped the edge of a nearby display to steady himself, forcing his expression to remain neutral. Zara studied him with open curiosity. "You know, Mr. Min, I've been thinking. Either you really love my shop, or you're running from something." He finally met her gaze, dark eyes narrowing slightly. "And what do you think I'm running from?" Her smile widened. "Yourself, maybe." The word pierced him. For a heartbeat, he forgot to breathe. Zara laughed softly, breaking the heavy silence. "I'm only teasing. But seriously, what's going on? You never bring guards. Never bring anyone. You just buy clothes like it's some kind of therapy." Jackson's jaw tightened. If only she knew. If only she understood how much power she unknowingly held over him. Instead of answering, he grabbed a sleek charcoal jacket from the rack. "This one," he muttered. Zara came around the counter, moving close enough that her perfume wrapped around him like a spell. She reached for the jacket, her fingers accidentally brushing against his hand. He jerked back slightly. Her eyes flicked up sharp and amused. "Are you nervous?" "No," he lied. The word tasted bitter. "Yes, you are," she teased. "The great Mafia boss. Nervous in front of a boutique owner. If people knew this side of you, it would make headlines." His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. For once, he didn't feel the urge to silence someone who mocked him. For once, he wanted to hear more. Outside across the street, the dark sedan had returned. Rival eyes watched through tinted windows, their suspicion growing sharper with each passing day. "He's here again," one whispered harshly. And again, without any protection. "This woman must mean something significant. If she does, she's his weakness, and weaknesses can be exploited." Back inside, Zara carried the jacket to the register. "So, tell me something," she said casually, folding the fabric carefully. "Why does someone like you, famous, feared, wealthy, keep coming back here?" He opened his mouth, but no words emerged. The truth clawed at his throat. "'Cause you woke me up. Because I thought I was dead inside until you spoke to me. Because I can't stop imagining your smile, your voice, your touch." Instead, he mumbled, "I appreciate your boutique." Zara rolled her eyes. "Sure you do." She leaned closer across the counter, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "You know, if you keep buying all these clothes, I might start thinking you're trying to impress someone." The air thickened instantly. Her words struck him deep, stirring images he couldn't control. Her in his arms, his lips on hers, her voice breaking with pleasure. His throat tightened, his body burning, his heart racing like he was facing his final battle. He clenched his fists hard. Not here, not now. That evening, Jackson's right-hand man finally confronted him. "Boss," the man said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "The rivals are talking. They say you've been distracted, that you're spending excessive time at a boutique." Jackson's gaze snapped up, sharp as broken glass. And the man hesitated, sweat forming on his brow. They say you're weak. That a woman has captured your attention. The room went deathly silent. Jackson rose from his chair, his presence suffocating every molecule of air. Do they believe a woman can destroy me? His man bowed his head quickly. Of course not, boss. But people are watching. If she matters to you, she's vulnerable. He dismissed his man with a wave, but the thought clung to him deep into the night. Danger surrounding Zara, the one person who had made him feel alive again. 2 nights later, he returned to the boutique once more, this time long after closing hours. The city had grown quiet, the street lights casting long shadows. He knocked gently against the glass door. Zara appeared inside, startled, but smiling when she recognized him. She unlocked the door. You again, do you ever sleep? He stepped inside, his presence filling the entire space. This time there were no customers, no noise, no distractions, just him and her. I wanted to see you, he said finally, his voice low and rough with honesty. Her playful expression faded into something softer. She studied him carefully, seeing the weight behind those words. Then sit, she said gently, gesturing toward a velvet chair. For the first time in his life, the savage Mafia boss obeyed without question. The city was restless that night. Rain hammered down on Seoul in heavy, relentless sheets. The streets turned slick with water and reflected neon glow. Somewhere in the chaos, shadows moved with purpose. Rival gangs who had been waiting, watching carefully. Jackson had made himself predictable. Every few days, he was spotted slipping into the boutique alone, without guards, without any protection. For the first time in years, the savage Mafia boss had developed a pattern, and patterns could be weaponized. The ambush struck fast. Jackson had just left Zara's, arms loaded with shopping bags he didn't actually need. When the van screeched around the corner, black masked figures poured out like predators, weapons glinting in the rain. He reacted on pure instinct. His reflexes were razor sharp, dropping the bags. He drew his concealed pistol and fired. Shot was clean, precise. 2 attackers collapsed, but 4 more charged forward. A blade slashed across his ribs, white-hot pain tearing through him. He fought like a cornered animal, his fury painting the night crimson, but they outnumbered him, and his strength began to falter as blood soaked into his shirt. A car horn blared nearby, scattering the attackers as headlights cut through the storm. The rivals fled, leaving him staggering in the rain, wounded and seething with rage. Instead of calling his men, Jackson did something reckless, something unthinkable for a Mafia boss. He dragged himself back to the boutique. By the time he collapsed against the glass doors, Zara was inside organizing inventory for the next day. She gasped at the sight of him, soaked, bleeding, his black shirt clinging to his body. Jackson. Her voice was sharp with panic. She rushed forward, unlocking the door and pulling him inside. Oh my God, what happened to you? Nothing, he muttered, his voice rough, teeth clenched against the pain. Just a minor injury. She glared at him. A minor injury. You're bleeding all over my boutique. He collapsed into one of the velvet chairs, his breathing shallow and labored. The savage Mafia boss who terrorized Seoul now sat slumped like a wounded boy. Zara's heart pounded wildly. She grabbed a first aid kit from the storage room, hands trembling but determined. Take off your shirt, she ordered firmly. He smirked faintly through the pain. You're very bold. Don't joke with me right now, she snapped. Do it. Slowly, he obeyed, peeling off the blood-soaked fabric. Zara's eyes widened at what she saw. Old scars crisscrossed his chest, layered with fresh cuts from tonight's fight. His body was strong, powerful, but marked by violence. She cleaned the gash on his side, pressing the cloth firmly. He hissed sharply, muscles tensing, his jaw clenching tight. Hold still, she murmured, her tone softening despite herself. You act like you're invincible, but you bleed just like everyone else. For a moment, their eyes locked. The distance between them shrank, heavy with something unspoken. Why didn't you call your men? She asked quietly. Why come here? He swallowed hard, his gaze burning into hers with intensity. Because I trust you. Her breath caught. The words were simple, but the weight they carried was impossible to ignore. As she bandaged his wound, the air grew charged with electricity. His body was close, his breath warm against her cheek. Her hands lingered on his skin longer than medically necessary, tracing the scars as if reading the story of his survival. You're insane, she whispered, shaking her head. A mafia boss showing up at a woman's boutique bleeding. Do you want to put me in danger? His lips twitched into half a smile, half a grimace. If they come for you, I'll destroy them. Something inside Zara shifted. This man was dangerous, broken, unpredictable. But in his rawness, she saw something authentic, something no amount of money or power could manufacture. Her fingers brushed against his, and the spark was undeniable. Jackson leaned in slowly, his usual confidence stripped completely away. For once, there was no mask, no savage facade, just a man craving something he thought he'd lost forever. Their lips met softly at first, tentative, then deeper, hungrier. Zara gasped against him, her heart racing as his hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer. The kiss was desperate, like a storm breaking after years of drought. He kissed her like a starving man, like the world might collapse if he didn't taste her. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Zara's eyes were wide with shock. What was that? She whispered. His gaze burned into hers, dark and raw with truth. The truth outside in the shadows. Unseen eyes watched the boutique through rain-streaked glass. A rival's voice whispered into a radio. He cares for her. He's bleeding. And he went to her. This is his weakness. And with that single observation, Zara's fate became entangled with his. The city outside sparkled like scattered jewels across velvet darkness. High-rise towers glowed with life. Cars hummed on the streets far below. But in the penthouse suite of Jackson, the mafia boss, time seemed to suspend itself. Zara stood by the expansive glass window, her reflection shimmering against the lights. She wore a simple silk dress he had purchased for her earlier that week, but on her body, it looked like something designed for royalty. Her hair fell in soft, natural curls, framing her face, and the warm smile she offered him was enough to strip every ounce of toughness from his chest. Jackson leaned against the edge of the leather sofa, his heartbeat chaotic. For days, he had dreamed of this moment, feared it, longed for it, agonized over it. The accident, the pain, the humiliations from doctors and failed encounters with models had carved deep wounds inside him. Yet here she was, this African woman named Zara, shattering every limitation of his broken body and igniting a fire that had lain dormant for far too long. Zara, he whispered, almost afraid of his own words. I don't know how to approach this gently. Zara turned, raising one eyebrow, her lips curving into a teasing smile. And here, I thought the mafia boss always knew exactly what to do. He chuckled nervously, running a hand through his dark hair. Not with you. I feel like I'll completely lose control. Then lose it, she said simply, stepping toward him, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. I'm not afraid of you. That was all he needed to hear. He grabbed her hand, pulled her against him, and kissed her as though he had been starved his entire existence. His lips crashed against hers with fierce desperation, full of hunger that had been buried in silence for too long. Zara gasped into the kiss, her hands clutching his shoulders. Feeling the raw strength trembling inside him, he lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the sofa as if she were the most precious treasure he had ever possessed. When their bodies touched, he moved like a man possessed by fire. Not clumsy, not uncertain, but burning with an intensity she had never experienced before. It wasn't just physical intimacy. It was proof, to himself, that he was still alive. Proof that the accident hadn't stolen his manhood. Proof that with her he was complete. Zara could barely breathe under the waves of passion he poured into her. He kissed every inch of her like he was memorizing her body. His hands explored with a mixture of reverence and urgency, as if each touch could erase the years of doubt inside him. Zara, he whispered hoarsely against her neck. You don't understand. This feels like the end of the world. Like if I don't give you everything now, I'll cease to exist. Her heart twisted at the broken honesty in his voice. She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. His dark eyes shimmered with tears he was too proud to let fall. Then live like the world is ending, she said, her voice soft but commanding. And he did. Jackson moved with a hunger that made Zara's body tremble. He was both gentle and wild, romantic yet savage. Every stroke, every kiss, every touch seemed to say, I'm alive because of you. Hours passed, but it felt like one long, endless moment of connection. When they finally collapsed into each other's arms, breathless and trembling. He buried his face against her chest like a child seeking comfort. His strong frame shook, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming relief of being liberated, free from shame, from fear, from loneliness. "I thought I was broken," he confessed, voice muffled against her skin. "All those nights I believed I was half a man." He pulled back, staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "And then you appeared, Zara. You gave me back everything. You healed me." Her eyes softened with emotion. She ran her fingers through his messy black hair, smiling at the man who only hours ago had seemed so untouchable, so terrifying to the world. To her, he was simply human, raw, vulnerable, and hers. "Maybe you were never broken," she whispered. "Maybe you were just waiting for the right woman." That struck him harder than any bullet ever could. He kissed her again, slower this time, tasting every ounce of sweetness her lips offered. From that night forward, he knew Zara wasn't just another woman passing through his life. She was his cure, his miracle, his salvation wrapped in silk and laughter. And for Zara, the shock of his passion that night left her stunned. She had never been loved with such desperate romance, such intensity, as though the man was writing his soul across her skin. She realized she wasn't just helping him reclaim his strength. She was falling into something far deeper than she had ever imagined possible. For the first time in his violent, chaotic life, Jackson whispered words he never thought he'd say. "Don't leave me ever." And for the first time in hers, Zara answered without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." The city outside kept shining, oblivious to the storm of love inside the penthouse. But in that room, under the glow of dim golden lights, the Mafia boss and the boutique owner sealed something more powerful than any criminal deal, more dangerous than any gang rivalry, and more unbreakable than any scar tissue. Raw, unstoppable, and burning as if the world was ending. Hello, beautiful souls. In this story, we discover that no matter how broken you believe you are, the right love can restore you completely. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. The following weeks passed like a dream wrapped in silk and danger. Jackson's world, once built on cold calculation and brutal efficiency, now revolved around stolen moments with Zara. He would slip away from strategy meetings, cancel arms deals, delay territorial negotiations, all to spend an hour watching her arrange displays or listening to her laugh at his awkward attempts at normal conversation. His lieutenants noticed the change immediately. The boss who once demanded perfection in every detail now seemed distracted, softer somehow. They whispered among themselves, but none dared confront him directly. Only his closest advisor, Chun, finally gathered the courage to speak. "Boss, we need to discuss the territory disputes in the East District," Chun said carefully during what should have been a routine briefing. "The Iron Wolves are pushing into our shipping lanes, and the police are asking questions about the warehouse incident." "Handle it," Jackson replied without looking up from his phone, where Zara had sent him a picture of a new dress design. Chen's jaw tightened. "Boss, with respect, these decisions require your direct attention. The shipping contracts alone are worth $50 million, and if we lose the East District." "I said handle it." Jackson's voice carried a warning edge, but it lacked his usual killing intent. "Find solutions. Use your judgment. I trust your capabilities." The room went silent. Chen exchanged glances with the other men, all of them thinking the same thing. This wasn't the ruthless leader who had built the Min Syndicate into Seoul's most feared organization. This was a man compromised, and in their world, compromise meant weakness. Weakness meant death. Meanwhile, across the city, Zara was discovering that loving a Mafia boss came with complications she hadn't anticipated. Strange cars began parking outside her boutique. Men in expensive suits would browse her store without buying anything, their eyes cataloging exits and security measures. Her regular customers started whispering about rumors, about the dangerous man who visited her shop, about whether it was safe to continue shopping there. Mrs. Kim, her most loyal customer, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Zara, dear," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the window. "People are talking. About him, about you. Maybe you should be careful." "Careful of what, Mrs. Kim? He's just a customer." Mrs. Kim's eyes were filled with genuine worry. "Men like that don't have customers," They have targets. And anyone close to them becomes a target too. That night, as Zara locked up the boutique, she found herself looking over her shoulder more than usual. The shadows seemed deeper. The alley beside her building felt more threatening. When a black sedan pulled up to the curb, her heart hammered against her ribs. But it was Jackson who stepped out, his face grim with concern. "You're late closing tonight," he said without preamble. I was worried. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of Seoul's most dangerous man worrying about her schedule, but the intensity in his eyes stopped her. "I had inventory to finish," she replied, studying his expression. "Why do you look like someone threatened to burn down the city?" "Because they have." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "The rival families are starting to move against me. They think you're my weakness, and they're planning to use that against me." The words hit her like ice water. She had known, intellectually, that being involved with him carried risks. But hearing it stated so bluntly made her stomach clench with fear. What kind of move? His jaw tightened. The kind that ends with blood on the streets and innocent people caught in crossfire. The kind that puts you in danger just for knowing me. He stepped closer, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. "I need you to understand something, Zara. What we have, what's growing between us, it's real. It's the most real thing in my life. But it also makes you a target." Zara searched his eyes, seeing the war raging behind them. The part of him that wanted to protect her battling against the part that couldn't bear to let her go. "And what are you asking me to do?" "Step back. Go somewhere safe until this is finished. Let me handle the families, clean up the threats, make Seoul safe for you again." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You want me to run? To hide while you fight a war over me? To abandon everything I've built here because some criminals think I matter to you?" She stepped back, anger flashing in her dark eyes. "I'm not some delicate flower who needs protection, Jackson. I've built this business from nothing, survived in this city on my own terms. I'm not running from anyone." The fire in her voice, the defiant tilt of her chin, only made him want her more. This was why he'd fallen for her, this strength that matched his own, this refusal to be intimidated even when she should be. But it was also why he was terrified of losing her. "Zara, you don't understand what these people are capable of." "I do," she shot back. "I understand that you're one of those people. I understand that your hands are covered in blood, that your empire is built on violence and fear. I chose you anyway. Chose this, chose us, despite knowing exactly who and what you are. Don't insult me by pretending I don't know the risks." Her words stripped him bare, left him standing exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. She saw him, truly saw him, and she'd chosen him anyway. The revelation was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. "Then you need to know the rest," he said quietly. "About what's coming. About what I'll have to do to keep you safe." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Shin burst into Jackson's office without knocking, his face pale with urgency. "Boss, we have a problem. The Dragon Triad just moved against the Iron Wolves' territory, but they're using it as cover to position themselves near Zara's boutique. Intelligence suggests they're planning something for tonight." Jackson's blood turned to ice. "What kind of something?" "The kind that sends a message. They want to prove that your association with her makes you weak, vulnerable. Taking her would accomplish that while giving them leverage over you." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jackson's voice, when he spoke, carried the promise of apocalypse. "How many men do they have positioned?" "At least 20 that we can confirm. Possibly more in reserve. They're taking this seriously, boss. They think this is their chance to break the men's syndicate permanently." Jackson stood slowly, his movement controlled but predatory. "They're wrong," he said simply. "Gather everyone. Every soldier, every affiliate, every man who owes us a favor. Tonight, we end the Dragon Triad permanently." "Boss," Chen hesitated. "That's a full-scale war. The police will intervene, the government will crack down, other families will choose sides. The entire balance of power in Seoul will shift." "I don't care about the balance of power." Jackson's voice was lethal quiet. "They threatened her. They made this personal. Now they face the consequences." The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons were distributed, positions were assigned, contingency plans were developed. But as evening approached, Jackson found himself standing outside Zara's boutique, watching her through the window as she helped a customer, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her. She looked so normal, so beautifully ordinary, arranging scarves and suggesting accessories. It struck him that this was what he'd been fighting for without knowing it. This glimpse of a world where beauty existed without violence, where someone could build something worthwhile without destroying others to protect it. But that world was an illusion, and tonight would prove it. Chen appeared beside him, his expression grim. The dragon positions are confirmed. They're moving into final staging areas now. Our teams are ready. Jackson nodded, never taking his eyes off Zara. When this starts, it's going to be chaos. Civilian casualties are inevitable, especially if they use explosives. I want her protected above everything else. Everything else, boss. Chen's voice was carefully neutral. The territory, the contracts, the other families watching to see how we handle this. Everything else comes second to her safety, Jackson confirmed. Use whatever resources necessary. If we lose Soul, but she survives, I'll consider it a victory. It was a confession that would have been professional suicide if anyone else had heard it. A mafia boss admitting that a woman mattered more than his empire was blood in the water for every rival who wanted to challenge him. But Chun had served Jackson for 8 years, had seen him build the syndicate from a small crew into a powerhouse that rivaled the old families. If the boss said she was worth it, Chun would trust that judgment. Understood, boss. What about her? Do we tell her what's coming? No, Jackson said finally. She'd try to help, try to fight, try to protect others. That's who she is. But I can't focus on winning if I'm watching her put herself in danger. We handle this quietly, quickly, and she never knows how close she came to losing everything. As if summoned by his words, Zara appeared in the boutique doorway, having spotted him through the window. She smiled and waved. And for a moment Jackson forgot about the approaching war, forgot about the men positioning themselves to destroy everything he cared about. For a moment, there was only her smile and the way it made him believe in possibility. Then Chen's radio crackled with urgent reports. Dragon teams are on the move, boss. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now. Jackson took one last look at Zara, memorizing her face in case this was the last time he saw it. Then he turned away from the light of her boutique and walked toward the darkness where wars were fought and legends were either made or destroyed. The battle for Soul was about to begin, and everything he'd ever wanted hung in the balance. The first shots rang out at 8:47 p.m., shattering the evening quiet like thunder in a clear sky. 3 blocks from Zara's boutique, the Dragon Triad's advance team had moved into position outside a men's syndicate safe house, expecting to find it lightly defended. Instead, they walked into a killing field. Jackson had anticipated their route, their timing, their tactical preferences. While they prepared to attack what they thought was his weakness, he struck at theirs. The Dragon Triad's primary weapons cache, hidden beneath a legitimate import business, erupted in flames as thermite charges reduced months of preparation to ash and twisted metal. Simultaneously, their communications hub went dark as Min hackers flooded their networks with viruses that would take days to untangle. But the masterstroke came when their leader's private residence, supposedly secure and secret, found itself surrounded by 50 of Soul's most dangerous killers. The war was over before most people realized it had begun. By 9:15, the Dragon Triad's command structure had been eliminated, their resources destroyed, their reputation shattered. The few survivors would spend years rebuilding what had taken decades to create, if they were lucky enough to avoid the authorities who were already closing in on their compromised operations. Through it all, Zara remained in her boutique, blissfully unaware that a shadow war had raged around her. She closed at her usual time, walked to her car without incident, drove home through streets that seemed perfectly normal. The only sign of disturbance was the distant sound of sirens. But in a city the size of Seoul, sirens were hardly unusual. It wasn't until the next morning that she learned what had happened. The news reports spoke of a gang war that had erupted suddenly and ended just as abruptly. Police had found evidence of weapons trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime activities, but the perpetrators had vanished like smoke. The Dragon Triad, once considered one of Seoul's most powerful criminal organizations, had simply ceased to exist overnight. Jackson found her in her boutique at noon, reading the news on her tablet with wide eyes. He looked exhausted, she noticed, as if he hadn't slept in days. There were small cuts on his knuckles that hadn't been there yesterday, and something in his posture suggested violence recently committed. Did you? She began, then stopped. Her eyes met his, and she saw the answer there. All of it. For you. His voice was steady, but she could hear the underlying weariness. They were planning to take you, to use you against me. So I removed them from the equation. The casual way he said it, as if eliminating an entire criminal organization was a minor administrative task, should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself studying his face, looking for regret or satisfaction or bloodlust. What she saw was simpler and more complex. Relief that she was safe, exhaustion from the strain of protecting her, and underneath it all, love that was willing to burn the world down rather than lose what it treasured most. How many people died because of me? She asked quietly. None because of you, he corrected. Because of men who thought they could use you to hurt me. The distinction matters. Does it? She set down her tablet and really looked at him. This man who had reshaped Seoul's criminal landscape in a single night to keep her safe. Because either way, people are dead because I chose to care about you. The guilt in her voice made his chest tighten. He crossed the space between them, taking her hands in his. Zara, listen to me. In my world, violence is inevitable. Men die for territory, for pride, for money, for reasons so petty you'd laugh if they weren't tragic. Last night, for the first time in my life, violence served something greater than ambition or fear. It served love. I won't apologize for protecting what I treasure most in this world. She wanted to argue, wanted to rail against the philosophy that said love justified war. But looking into his eyes, she saw something that stopped her cold. This wasn't a man who glorified violence or sought excuses for brutality. This was a man who had found something worth protecting and had done what he believed necessary to preserve it. The weight of that realization was staggering. I never asked you to kill for me, she whispered. You never had to, he replied simply. That's what love is. Acting without being asked. Protecting without being requested. Fighting battles that the person you love should never have to know about. They stood in her boutique, surrounded by beautiful clothes and elegant displays, having a conversation about love and death as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps, in their reality, it was. The weeks that followed brought a peace to Seoul that hadn't existed in years. With the Dragon Triad eliminated and the Iron Wolves too intimidated to test the Min Syndicate's resolve, the criminal underground settled into a careful equilibrium. Police noted the dramatic decrease in gang-related violence, but wisely chose not to investigate too closely. Sometimes, stability was more valuable than justice. For Jackson and Zara, it meant freedom they had never expected to have. He could visit her boutique without watching for snipers. She could close late without fearing ambush. They could walk Seoul's streets hand in hand, a sight that made rival families think twice about challenging the man who had demonstrated his willingness to wage total war for love. But with security came new challenges. The intensity that had forged their bond during those dangerous weeks needed new outlets, new expressions. They had fallen in love while surrounded by threats and uncertainty. Now they had to learn how to love in peacetime, how to build something lasting rather than just surviving moment to moment. Jackson discovered that running a criminal empire was easier than learning to be vulnerable in quiet moments. Zara found that caring for someone whose life was built on violence required constant negotiation between her values and her heart. They fought, passionately and often, about his refusal to discuss certain aspects of his work, about her insistence on maintaining independence when he wanted to surround her with protection, about the future they were trying to build together despite coming from worlds that should never have intersected. But they also loved with the same intensity that had drawn them together in that boutique, when his broken body had responded to her voice like a prayer answered. He would spend hours watching her work, marveling at the way her hands brought beauty into existence through fabric and thread. She would hold him in the darkness after nightmares about the violence in his past, her presence more healing than any therapy he had ever attempted. 6 months after the night the Dragon Triad died, Jackson made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He began systematically transitioning the Min Syndicate away from its most violent enterprises. Drug trafficking became financial consulting for businesses operating in gray legal areas. Protection rackets evolved into legitimate security services. Weapons smuggling shifted toward private military contracting for corporations needing discrete problem-solving. It wasn't redemption, exactly. It was evolution. The skills that had built a criminal empire were being repurposed to create something that could exist in daylight, something worthy of the woman who had chosen to love him despite knowing exactly who he was. The transformation wasn't without cost. 3 of his lieutenants left, unwilling to follow a boss they saw as going soft. 2 rival families tested his resolve, thinking the changes indicated weakness. Both learned definitively that evolution didn't mean pacification. Jackson's capacity for violence hadn't diminished. It had simply become more selective, more purposeful. And through it all, Zara expanded her boutique into a full fashion house, her designs gaining recognition beyond Seoul's elite circles. She hired seamstresses, opened a second location, began working with international buyers who appreciated her unique aesthetic. Success built on talent rather than fear, achievement earned through creativity rather than intimidation. They were becoming something new together, something that belonged fully to neither of their original worlds, but created its own space between light and shadow. A year after their first meeting, they stood together in Zara's redesigned boutique, now 3 times its original size, and featuring her own clothing line. The space hummed with activity as her staff prepared for Seoul Fashion Week, where her collection would debut on an international stage. "You know," Jackson said, watching her direct the controlled chaos with natural authority, "I never imagined this. Any of this. Building something instead of just taking or protecting what already existed." She turned to him, her smile radiant with accomplishment and exhaustion. "Is that what we're doing? Building? I thought we were just surviving." "Maybe they're the same thing," he replied. "Maybe love is just another word for choosing to build something together, even when the foundation is shaky and the materials are imperfect." Zara laughed, the sound cutting through the boutique's noise like music. "Is that your philosophy now? Build love on uncertain ground and hope the structure holds." "Something like that." He grinned, pulling her close despite the witnesses and the work waiting to be done. "Though I have to admit, the foundation feels pretty solid these days." She melted into his embrace, marveling at how natural this had become. A mafia boss and a boutique owner, finding love in the most unlikely circumstances, building something beautiful from the raw materials of danger and desire. Tomorrow there would be fashion shows and business meetings, rival families and police investigations, all the complicated realities of their intertwined lives. But tonight, in her boutique, surrounded by the evidence of her creativity and his protection, they had everything they needed. Each other, and the stubborn insistence that love could transform anything, even the most broken of men and the most dangerous of worlds. Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility, and inside, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds continued the work of building forever, one careful stitch at a time. Beautiful souls, remember that love is not about perfection or safety. Sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the crucible of danger and uncertainty. Thank you for joining this journey of transformation and devotion. Subscribe for more stories that explore the depths of human connection, and share this with someone who believes in love's power to heal and transform.